The Great Hall of Thalrun was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into soft blue light, and its pillars were carved from crystal older than most stars. Every sound echoed for just a little too long, reminding all who entered that this was not a place for quick words or careless actions. The air itself seemed to judge those who breathed it. The Queen of Thalrun sat upon her living throne, unmoving. Her many advisors stood in a perfect curve behind her, their robes arranged according to rank, age, and species. Diplomats from dozens of star systems waited in silence, each rehearsing their words in their minds. In this hall, mistakes were remembered for centuries. At the far end of the chamber, the doors opened. The sound was gentle, almost polite, yet every head turned. A new delegation had arrived. They were human. Most of the court barely reacted. Humans were known, but rarely respected. Short-lived, physically fragile, and emotionally expressive, they were considered minor participants in galactic affairs. They traded, they explored, they asked many questions, but they did not rule. They had no ancient empire, no mythic wars, no legendary dynasties. The queen did not move. Her gaze remained forward, her posture calm. To all appearances, this was just another diplomatic visit. The human delegation walked slowly across the polished floor. There were only 3 of them, 2 aides and 1 representative in the center. He wore simple clothing by galactic standards. No shining medals, no status markings, no visible technology beyond a small translation device at his ear. He walked with relaxed confidence, not arrogance, but not fear either. Some observers found that unsettling. When the humans reached the marked position before the throne, they stopped. Silence settled again, thick and heavy. A court official stepped forward and announced the delegation in the proper ceremonial tone. Titles were spoken, affiliations listed, and treaties referenced. The words flowed as expected, predictable, and safe. Then came the final step. "State your name," the official said, turning toward the human representative. The man nodded once. "My name," he said calmly, "is Elias Mercer." The words had barely finished echoing when everything changed. The queen rose. It was not a graceful movement. It was sudden, sharp, and filled with unmistakable alarm. Her throne shifted beneath her as she stood, and the lights of the hall flickered in response. Several advisors gasped before they could stop themselves. "He is here," the queen cried. Her voice carried power not through volume but through authority and fear. The entire hall froze, protocol shattered in an instant. No one spoke, no one moved. The human named Elias blinked. He turned slightly, glancing back at his aides, confusion clear on his face. "I think," he said quietly, "there may be a mistake." The queen did not sit back down. Her eyes were locked on him, wide and unblinking. Her breathing had changed, slower now, controlled with effort. She raised one hand, signaling her guards and advisors alike to remain still. "Confirm the name," she said, her voice lower now but no less tense. An elder archivist stepped forward from the shadows behind the throne. His species was ancient even by galactic standards. His skin bore natural markings that recorded memory and time. He hesitated, then activated a small floating console. "Name recorded as Elias Mercer," he said after a pause. "Human, Terran origin, no known criminal or military distinction." A murmur spread through the court. The queen's grip tightened on the edge of her throne. "Open the sealed archives," she said. The archivist stiffened. "Your Majesty, those records are—" "Open them," she repeated. The room felt colder. The human delegation exchanged looks. Elias took a careful step forward, hands visible, movements slow. "Your Majesty," he said, choosing his words with care, "I assure you I mean no offense. I am here as a diplomatic envoy only. If my presence is unsettling, I can withdraw." The queen's gaze softened just slightly, but the fear did not leave her eyes. "You do not know," she said. "That much is clear." She looked to the archivist again. "Read." The archivist swallowed and adjusted the console. A projection appeared above it, filled with symbols so old that many in the court could not read them. "Record designation," the archivist began. "Event classified beyond extinction level. Initiated approximately 900 standard cycles ago." Whispers grew louder. "Primary external agent," he continued slowly. "Identified as a human. Name recorded as Elias Mercer." The sound of shock rippled through the hall. Elias felt his chest tighten. "That's not possible," he said. "I'm 34 years old." The archivist nodded. "Yes, that is noted in the margin." The queen finally stepped down from her throne. The act alone sent another wave of unease through the chamber. She descended the steps until she stood only a short distance from the human. "You carry the name," she said, "and with it the echo." "I don't understand," Elias replied honestly. "Few ever did," she said. "That is why it worked." She turned to the court, her voice steadying as she spoke. Long before this concord existed, before these alliances and laws, the galaxy stood at the edge of collapse. Not from war, not from plague, but from certainty. The court listened in silence. "Our civilizations believed they had solved existence," the queen continued. "Every variable mapped, every species assigned its role, progress became rigid, thought became closed." She looked back at Elias. "And then a human arrived." The archivist scrolled through the record, images and data flickering. "He did not command fleets," the archivist said. "He did not threaten force. He asked questions, simple ones, questions our systems could not answer." Elias shook his head slowly. "I've never left human space before last year." "That is irrelevant," the queen said. "The first did not come as a hero, he came as a person." She turned away from him, addressing the court again. "He challenged our assumptions. He showed us that logic without empathy becomes blindness. That systems built to last forever will break if they forget those who live inside them." A silence followed, heavy with thought. "And when he was done," the queen said softly, "he left. Humanity made no claim. Asked for no reward, we survived because of him, and then we chose to forget." Elias felt a strange weight settle over him. "So why react like this?" he asked. "I'm not him." The queen met his eyes. "No," she said, "but history does not care about flesh alone. Names carry meaning, they are patterns, signals." One of the advisors stepped forward, visibly shaken. "Your Majesty, protocol has been broken, the court." "The court will endure," the queen said sharply. She faced Elias once more. "The law forbade us from acknowledging humans by name in this hall," she said, "because names remind us, and reminders lead to change." Elias exhaled slowly. "I didn't come here to scare anyone." "That," the queen replied, "is exactly what frightens us." She straightened, regaining some of her regal composure, though the tension remained. "You will stay," she said. "You will speak, and you will tell us whether humanity remembers what it once taught the galaxy." The hall remained silent, every being aware that something ancient had been awakened. Elias nodded, not because he understood, but because he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever had begun long ago had not truly ended. And the galaxy had just noticed humanity again. The hall did not return to normal after that moment. Even when the queen resumed her throne and the formal tension of the court tried to rebuild itself, something had shifted. It was like a crack in crystal, small but impossible to ignore once seen. Every glance now drifted toward the human envoy, Elias Mercer, as if he carried unseen gravity. The queen raised one hand, and the advisors slowly relaxed their rigid stances. The guards stepped back into their ceremonial positions, though their attention never fully left Elias. Silence remained, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with questions. "You will walk with me," the queen said at last, her voice controlled but still carrying an edge. "This court session is suspended." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Suspending a full court session was nearly unheard of. Without waiting for approval, the queen stood and turned toward a side passage hidden behind the throne. The elder archivist followed at once, clutching his console. After a brief hesitation, Elias gestured for his aides to remain where they were and followed the queen alone. The passage was narrow compared to the grand hall, its walls smooth and dimly lit. The air felt older here, untouched by ceremony. The queen walked in silence for several long moments before speaking again. "You truly do not know why your name matters," she said, not looking back. "No," Elias replied. "On Earth, it's just a name, a common one." "That is what makes it dangerous," she said softly. They entered a circular chamber filled with floating light panels. Ancient symbols drifted across them, constantly shifting. This was not a public archive. Elias could sense that immediately. The queen gestured for him to stand in the center. "These records were sealed not to protect us from humans," she said, "but to protect us from ourselves." The archivist activated the displays. Images formed, star systems, diplomatic chambers, unfamiliar species. At the center of many recordings stood a human man. He looked ordinary, no armor, no weapons, calm eyes, a posture that suggested listening more than speaking. "That was him," the archivist said. "The first Elias Mercer." Elias stared. "He looks normal." Yes, the Queen said. That was the problem. The image shifted to a council chamber, larger than the one Elias had just left. Alien representatives argued, their voices overlapping in recorded frustration. At that time, the Queen explained, the galaxy was ruled by certainty. We believed complexity could be eliminated. Entire cultures were reorganized for efficiency. Emotional variance was seen as a flaw. She paused, then added, humans were classified as unstable thinkers. That sounds familiar, Elias said quietly. The archivist allowed a faint, humorless expression. The human did not argue against our systems. He asked why we believed them to be complete. The recording showed the human speaking, his tone calm. Subtitles translated his words. What happens, the human asked, when the equation meets something it was never designed to understand? The council in the recording dismissed him at first. Elias could see it clearly, polite smiles, calculated patience. But he stayed, the Queen said. He listened. He learned our languages, our histories, and then he began to speak again. The images changed, charts collapsed, predictions failed, systems that had been considered perfect began producing conflicting results. He introduced variables we had excluded, the archivist said. Compassion, irrational loyalty, hope without proof. Elias frowned. Those don't sound like weapons. They were not, the Queen replied. That is why we could not defend against them. The recordings showed negotiations stalling, then restarting under new rules. Species once dismissed as inefficient were suddenly included again. Old decisions were questioned. He never demanded change, the Queen said. He made us uncomfortable enough to choose it ourselves. Elias felt a strange mix of pride and unease. And when he was done, he left, the Queen said. No announcement, no claim of success. He simply returned to human space. The lights dimmed slightly. We feared what would happen if more humans followed, she continued. Not because you would destroy us, but because you would make us uncertain again. The archivist closed several panels. The Concord was formed soon after. One of its first hidden laws was to limit human involvement. Trade was allowed. Observation was allowed. But deep influence was discouraged. Elias let out a slow breath. So you erased him. We buried the memory, the Queen corrected, and hoped it would never return. She turned to Elias, studying him carefully. Then you arrived, same name, same calm presence. Same way of looking at the world as if it might still surprise you. I'm just a diplomat, Elias said. I'm not here to change anyone. The Queen tilted her head. Neither was he. A long silence followed. Does humanity remember? She asked at last. Elias thought of Earth. Of endless debates, messy politics, flawed systems that never seemed finished. Of humans arguing, helping, failing, trying again. We don't remember him, Elias said honestly, but we remember the idea. The Queen's expression tightened. Explain. We believe systems should serve people, Elias said. Not the other way around. We expect change. We plan for it even when we don't like it. The archivist's markings darkened slightly, a sign of deep concern. That philosophy is disruptive. Yes, Elias agreed. But it keeps us alive. The Queen turned away, pacing slowly around the chamber. The galaxy has grown stable, she said. Peaceful, predictable. And stagnant, Elias replied gently. She stopped. You speak boldly for a species once dismissed, she said. Elias met her gaze. You dismissed us because we don't fit cleanly. That hasn't changed. The Queen returned to the center, standing before him. Do you know why the law forbade us from speaking human names here? She asked. Elias shook his head. Because names remind us that history is shaped by individuals, she said. And individuals are unpredictable. She straightened, her voice growing stronger. You have reopened a door we sealed out of fear. Other species will notice. Questions will spread. I didn't plan that, Elias said. No, the Queen replied, but neither did the first. She studied him for a long moment, then spoke words that carried weight far beyond the chamber. You will address the full Concord, she said. Not as a threat, not as a savior. But as a reminder, Elias swallowed. That's a lot to ask. The Queen allowed a small, tired smile. The galaxy once survived because of a human who asked simple questions. She turned toward the exit. Let us see what happens when one returns. As they walked back toward the Great Hall, the echoes of the past followed them. And far beyond the walls of Thalrun, dormant archives stirred, ancient protocols adjusting themselves. Humanity had not raised a weapon. They had raised a memory. And the galaxy was beginning to feel uneasy again. The announcement spread through the Concord faster than any official signal. By the time Elias Mercer was escorted back into the Great Hall, representatives from distant systems were already requesting access, clarification, explanation. Some demanded records, others demanded silence. A few demanded that the human be removed before instability increased. The Queen ignored them all. She took her throne again, posture composed, voice steady, but something had changed in how she looked at the hall. She was no longer seeing ranks and rituals. She was seeing reactions. Elias stood where he had before, alone at the center of the vast chamber. His aides had been escorted away for their own comfort. He suspected that was only partly true. The Queen raised her hand. "Let the conquered speak," she said. The chamber came alive. Holographic forms shimmered into existence around the hall, each representing a distant council or ruling body. Some appeared calm, others flickered with agitation. Languages overlapped as translation systems struggled to keep pace. "This is unacceptable," said one voice, sharp and metallic. "The sealed archives were never meant to be reopened." "You cannot pretend this is coincidence," said another, softer but filled with unease. "A human bearing that name appearing now during this cycle of reform." A third voice cut through. "Humans were restricted for a reason." Elias remained silent. He had learned long ago that humans often spoke too quickly when uncomfortable. This time he listened. The Queen allowed the noise to continue for several long seconds before speaking. "You fear humanity," she said calmly, "yet none of you can clearly state why." The voices faltered. One representative, ancient and luminous, finally spoke. "Humans disrupt equilibrium." Elias lifted his head slightly. "Equilibrium," the Queen repeated, "or control." A ripple of discomfort passed through the holograms. The luminous being responded, "We achieved peace through order, through systems refined over centuries." "And those systems," the Queen said, "nearly collapsed before." Silence followed. Elias felt the weight of attention shift fully onto him. The Queen turned her gaze toward him. "You will speak now," she said, "not to defend humanity, but to explain it." Elias took a slow breath. "I won't pretend we're special," he began. His voice carried clearly through the hall. "We're not stronger, we're not wiser, we don't live longer than most of you." Several representatives leaned closer, curious despite themselves. "What we are," Elias continued, "is unfinished." A murmur spread. "Human systems are never complete," he said. "Our governments, our sciences, even our cultures, we argue constantly because we expect change, we assume we're wrong about something." "That is inefficiency," one voice said. "Yes," Elias agreed easily. "It is. But it also means we adapt." He gestured slightly, careful to keep his movements non-threatening. "When something doesn't fit our rules, we don't erase it, we argue about it, we adjust, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully." The Queen watched closely, her expression unreadable. "You fear us because we don't protect certainty," Elias said. "We protect people, and people are unpredictable." A representative near the edge of the projection spoke up. "Your kind caused disorder in the past." Elias nodded. "We probably did." That answer caused visible confusion. "You admit it?" another voice asked. "Yes," Elias said. "Disorder isn't always destruction, sometimes it's growth." The Queen leaned forward slightly. "Tell them," she said, "why humanity never claimed its influence." Elias hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Because we don't always notice it," he said. "Humans don't see helping as ownership, we see it as responsibility." The archivist, standing near the throne, made a quiet sound of realization. A new voice entered the discussion, colder than the rest. "You are dangerous because you do not seek control." Elias met the direction of that voice. "That's true," he said. "Control doesn't last, trust does, and trust requires risk." The hall grew quiet again. The Queen stood. "The conquered fears humanity because humans remind us of something we tried to forget," she said. "That peace is not the absence of change, it is the ability to survive it." She turned toward Elias. "And now the question before us is simple," she said. "Do we continue to limit humanity out of fear, or do we face the uncertainty they bring?" Immediately, protests erupted. "We are stable now," one representative argued. "Our models show long-term sustainability." "Your models once showed collapse as impossible," the Queen replied. Another voice spoke, hesitant. "If humans return to full participation, our systems will be questioned again." "Yes," the Queen said, "they will." Elias felt a strange tension in his chest. He had not come to overturn anything, yet here he was at the center of something far larger than a treaty. "I didn't come here to demand change," he said quietly. I came to listen. The queen turned to him. That is what frightens them most. She addressed the conquered once more. Humanity does not arrive with fleets, she said. They arrive with questions. The archivist stepped forward, emboldened. Already archived protocols are reactivating. Requests for reevaluation are spreading. A ripple of alarm followed. You see, one voice said sharply, instability. The queen's voice hardened. No, awareness. She raised her hand, and the hall obeyed. We will not silence humanity again, she declared. But neither will we surrender governance to them. She looked at Elias. You will remain here, she said. Not as a ruler, not as an advisor, but as a participant. Elias blinked. In what? In discussion, she replied. In disagreement, in uncertainty. The conquered reacted with mixed signals, some relief, some outrage, some cautious interest. A representative spoke, slower than the others. And if this leads to division, the queen answered without hesitation, then we face it together, as we should have before. The holograms slowly dimmed, one by one, until only the great hall remained. Elias released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That went better than I expected, he said quietly. The queen allowed a faint smile. You underestimate your effect. I still don't feel like I've done anything, Elias admitted. She studied him. That, she said, is exactly why you have. Later, as Elias was escorted to temporary quarters within the palace, he noticed movement beyond the walls, data streams, diplomatic signals, old networks awakening. Messages were being sent. Questions were being asked. Old assumptions were being reopened. Elsewhere in the galaxy, councils reviewed forgotten files. Scholars reread dismissed theories. Younger species wondered why humans had been kept at a distance. No alarms sounded. No fleets moved. But something far more unsettling was happening. The galaxy was thinking again, and at the quiet center of it all was a human who had done nothing more than exist honestly, carrying a name that reminded the stars that certainty had never truly won. The conquered would never be the same. The days that followed were quieter on the surface, but beneath that calm, the conquered was changing. Elias Mercer noticed it first in small ways. Conversations in the palace corridors lasted longer than before. Advisors who once spoke only in rehearsed phrases now paused, thinking before answering. Some even disagreed with each other openly, something that would have been unthinkable only days ago. The queen noticed it too. She watched from her throne as reports arrived from across the galaxy. None spoke of war or rebellion. Instead, they spoke of reviews, discussions, and questions. Councils were reopening old decisions. Committees were asking why certain laws existed at all. Species that had long accepted their assigned roles were asking if those roles still made sense. Stability was still there, but it was no longer rigid. Elias spent much of his time in shared chambers with scholars, diplomats, and analysts. They asked him about Earth. About human disagreements, failures, and mistakes. They seemed surprised when he did not hide them. We argue a lot, Elias said more than once. Sometimes too much, but it means no idea is ever sacred. One scholar asked him, does that not exhaust your people? Elias smiled slightly. Yes, but we think exhaustion is better than silence. The queen listened to many of these conversations from a distance. She did not interrupt. She was learning as much as anyone else. One evening, she asked Elias to walk with her through the upper gardens of the palace. The stars above Thalrun were bright and steady, ancient patterns unchanged for ages. You have done what many feared, the queen said as they walked. You have made us uncertain. I'm sorry, Elias replied instinctively. She stopped and looked at him. No, she said, I am not. She gestured toward the sky. For centuries, we believed we had reached the final shape of civilization. That belief made us afraid of change. She turned back to him. Humans never believed that, did they? Elias shook his head. We don't think there is a final shape, just the next one. The queen was silent for a long moment. The conquered will survive this, she said finally, but it will not remain the same. That was always going to happen, Elias said gently, with or without us. She studied him. And humanity, what do you want from all this? Elias thought carefully. A seat at the table, not to lead, just to be heard. The queen nodded slowly. Then you shall have it. The next gathering of the conquered was unlike any before it. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic ceremonies. Instead, the queen stood and spoke plainly. Humanity will no longer be limited by silent law, she said. They will participate as equals, subject to the same scrutiny and responsibility as all others. There was no applause, but there was no protest either. Elias was invited to speak last. "I won't promise solutions," he said. "Humans are bad at that. What we can promise is questions and the willingness to change our minds." Some representatives seemed uneasy, others looked thoughtful. A few looked relieved. After the session ended, the Queen remained seated, watching the empty hall. "You did not claim power," she said to Elias, who stood nearby. "We don't trust power that much," he replied. She allowed a small laugh. "Perhaps that is why you are trusted." In the cycles that followed, humans began to appear more often in conquered spaces. Not in large numbers, but enough to be noticed. They joined research teams, mediation councils, and exploratory committees. They argued, they compromised, they failed sometimes. And when they failed, they admitted it. That behavior spread. Other species began doing the same. Old archives were opened fully at last. The story of the first Elias Mercer was no longer sealed. It was taught openly, not as legend, but as example. Not of perfection, but of influence without domination. One record ended with a simple note written by an ancient hand. "He did not save us. He reminded us how to save ourselves." The Queen ordered that note preserved. Years later, as Elias prepared to return to Earth, the Queen met him one last time in the Great Hall where everything had begun. "You arrived by accident," she said. "But you leave as part of our history." Elias looked around the vast chamber. It felt less oppressive now, less heavy. "I still feel like I just talked to people," he said. She smiled. "That is how history usually changes." She rose from her throne, not in alarm this time, but in respect. "Tell humanity this," she said. "The galaxy is not afraid of you anymore." Elias nodded. "I will." As his ship departed Thalrune, signals followed it, not warnings, but invitations, cooperation requests. Shared research, open dialogues. Far away on worlds Elias would never visit, young beings studied human philosophy for the first time. Not because it was superior, but because it was different. The conquered did not collapse, it evolved. And somewhere in the deep archives of the galaxy, a truth was finally accepted. Humanity's greatest strength was never force or intelligence. It was the quiet courage to admit they were unfinished. And in doing so, they gave the stars permission to be unfinished too.